If you don't believe that lost civilizations could have flourished during ancient prehistory, then by the end of this video, you'll probably change your mind. Because by using evidence exclusively from the scientific literature, I'm going to show that this isn't just possible, it's arguably more likely than not. Hi guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Michael. I have a degree in ancient history, and on this channel, we discuss the unexplainable mysteries of our past. Let's get into it. We'll start with some facts. Firstly, we know it only takes a few thousand years for humans to develop civilization. Let me explain. The current view is that civilization developed because of the Neolithic Revolution, i.e. the invention of agriculture. This innovation changed everything, making an increasingly large population possible and leading to cities, writing, and progress. However, the earliest this possibly started is 10,000 BC, and the earliest accepted civilization is 4000 BC, with ancient Sumer. This means that at the very longest, it only took humans 6,000 years to develop civilization. But to be honest, probably less. We see cities like Çatalhöyük from 7,500 BC, meaning it only took 2,500 years. But even if we take the longest possible time of 6,000 years, that is nothing. You may be thinking, Mike, 6,000 years, that's ages. But my friends, compared to the human story, it's just a blip. Time for the next fact. We know that anatomically modern humans, as intelligent as us, have been around for at least 300,000 years, and this could go back much further. These are just the earliest remains we've found so far. So if we know it only takes humans 6,000 years to develop civilization, and that this is just a tiny percentage of our human past, why couldn't prehistoric humans have done this before? I mean, it's not like there wasn't enough time. Well, I know many people will say civilization only developed because of the climate, because it got warmer. We came out of the last ice age and warmer conditions enabled the invention of agriculture, blah de blah, and I made a whole video about this, which did kind of well, and even had Joe Rogan talking about it.
His name is Michael Button, and he had a very good point.
But just to summarize quickly, this doesn't really add up, because although it may have been the warmer climate that led to the invention of agriculture, warm periods have happened plenty of times before while humans have been around, and for more than a long enough time, so why is it so absurd to think the previous warm periods could have seen agriculture and civilization develop, considering we know it only takes 6,000 years max? I think it's entirely possible, but rewatching this video really got me thinking, why would it even have to be a warm period? It's time for the next fact. Even during the coldest glacial periods, we know that not every part of Earth was a frozen wasteland. No, far from it. Plenty of places around the planet remained perfectly habitable and even lush. I mean, just look at this map. This displays vegetation on Earth during the last glacial maximum, i.e. at the very coldest point. You can see the ice sheets covering huge parts of the northern hemisphere, but you can also see rainforests, grasslands, woods, and jungle all over the place. Even during the very coldest periods, there were plenty of areas on Earth where the climate was perfect for civilization to develop. A great example is the Sahara Desert. Every 20,000 years, due to Earth's axial precession, the Sahara turns into a lush landscape, regardless of whether it's a glacial period. Think about that. The Sahara was green and lush on 8 separate occasions, each lasting 20,000 years, and all while humans have been here. So surely it's possible that agriculture and civilization could have flourished on many parts of the planet, even during the coldest times, right? I mean, sure, it would have been easier in the warmer periods, no doubt, but in my view, definitely still possible in the colder ones too. But that brings me on to my next point. Why did it even have to be agriculture? Civilization didn't have to follow the path that we took. We assume farming was inevitable because that's how we did it, but that's a biased view. What if a stable civilization had emerged from agroforestry, like we see in the Amazon? Or what about based on fishing and ocean farming, like in pre-colonial British Columbia? If you're harvesting protein from the sea, you don't need to invent crops. What if large societies built themselves around herds and mobility, kind of like Genghis Khan and the Mongols? There's many other ways, and it seems perfectly feasible, to me at least, that civilizations of the past could have developed different ways to sustain large populations from the path that we took. We're projecting our story as the only story, but innovation rarely sticks to one script. So the point I'm trying to make here is it's actually kind of silly to assume that civilization started when it's accepted. We massively underrate prehistoric humans, the huge amount of time they had available, and what they could have achieved. Think of all the lives, the stories, the cultures that have been lost to time. It seems way more crazy to me that we barely developed a tool until the Neolithic, and then wham! everything started happening. No, it seems more obvious that this is just a case of our own recency bias. The further back we go, the harder it is to see anything, so we just assume that nothing happened. We're supposed to believe that the human story is one huge linear upward path, all the way to the very end, until finally someone invented agriculture. And then boom, so much progress. But if agriculture was so important, why did it take so long to invent? Why would humans as intelligent as us not develop really at all for 99% of our history? Especially when we know we can develop relatively quickly. What if the Neolithic Revolution wasn't the start of civilization, but a reboot? It seems to me more likely than not that we did develop before in the deep past and that we've just lost all memory of this. But once you accept that possibility, the next question is, where's all the evidence? It's a fair challenge, but the problem is the further back you go, the harder it is to see stuff. As I covered before, scientific studies show that most traces of our civilization would be gone in a mere 10,000 years, and once you get up to 100,000 years, there's basically nothing left. Concrete would be gone in a few centuries. Aluminium would decompose in 200 to 500 years, plastic in only 20 to 500 years. Even steel corrodes in just a few decades, and only takes a maximum of 1,000 years to fully disappear. Glass may take a bit longer, but it's brittle and fractures into tiny pieces, becoming basically invisible in the archaeological record. Really, the only thing that could possibly survive from us would be our nuclear waste deposits. But an ancient civilization didn't necessarily have to have nuclear technology to still be advanced. The other possibility is maybe carved stone. Think Mount Rushmore or the pyramids, stone being the only likely thing to survive. But what I don't think many people appreciate is the huge changes the Earth has experienced while humans have been around. It's massively underrated how much natural catastrophe has shaped our world, and how this has the potential to wipe out any trace of past civilizations. I mentioned the Mount Toba eruption last time, which reduced human population down to only 10,000 or so individuals. But what about the Campi Flegrei supervolcano eruption 39,000 years ago, which resulted in an ecological crisis that wiped out both the last Neanderthals and vast swathes of the Homo sapien population? This catastrophe was supercharged by the Glacial event occurring at the same time, which was when Earth's magnetic field weakened dramatically right down to 5% of current levels, causing a huge increase in radiation, a drastic cooling period, and contributing to the extinction of megafauna. There's been megadroughts on at least 7 separate occasions during the human story, and that's not to mention comet impacts. The Wolfe Creek impact, dated to 120,000 years ago, more than halfway through the human story, struck with the force of 0.54 megatons of TNT. That's about 70 times bigger than the Hiroshima nuclear bomb. The Arizona meteor crater is dated even more recently, to 50,000 years ago, and is estimated to have released 10 megatons of TNT. That's 667 times more powerful than the Hiroshima nuclear bomb. I don't think I've got to go into the catastrophic effects that a comet impact has on Earth, but the resulting mega floods, firestorms, and ecological destruction across the entire planet would be more than enough to wipe out any trace of a civilization. But the thing is, our understanding and the data of catastrophe like this has only really developed in the last few decades. However, the narrative we have around our ancient prehistory goes back for centuries, so I believe that with time, the evidence that we're getting from geology and climate science will link up with historical analysis, and will lead to our thinking, our perspective of the past being updated. It's just going to take time. So it's with this view that I think it's time to start re-evaluating many of the mysterious sites we see across the world. Remember when I said stone was the only thing that could survive? Well, we see many examples of ancient stone construction that archaeology really struggles to explain. There's Ollantaytambo, Sacsayhuaman, Pumapunku, Tiwanaku, Longyou Caves, Baalbek, Malta, Stonehenge, Karnak, Siustani, Quenuani. There's so many, and that's not to mention the deep mysteries of ancient Egypt, Göbekli Tepe, and many more. I think we need to start viewing these sites with a different perspective. I don't understand why people attack alternative ideas about history when the only thing we really know is how much we don't know. But other than stone, there is one more thing that could have survived: the human memory. I'm not going to go too deep into this, but it's worth noting. Pretty much every ancient culture has myths of massive cataclysms, floods, fire from the sky, civilizations wiped clean, stories of a golden age before it all collapsed. And what's wild is these myths don't just talk about one disaster, they hint at cycles, civilizations rising, reaching a peak and then falling, only for it all to start over again. It's like history doesn't move in a straight line. Maybe it loops. What if civilization civilization has happened before, and the only thing we have left is mysterious stone ruins and ancient memory passed down through myth. Now let me be clear, obviously nothing I've said in this video is proof of a lost civilization, far from it. Like, you can make a very fair argument that we have an absence of solid evidence for a lost civilization. But absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. This isn't about proving a lost civilization existed, it's about asking why we assume it couldn't have. Because I would argue the evidence points to this being a perfectly feasible possibility. And if it really is the case, well, that changes everything. That's it from me, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to my channel. Peace!